Hello and welcome to the Chaddy Enders. I'm David Broadbent, and every week I am joined by somebody associated with Oldham Athletic Football Club as we take a look back on their time at Boundary Park. We're episode 9 this week. Flying through these. I can't believe it's been 9 weeks already. A big thank you, as always, to our sponsors, to AC Tyres, Wayne and the team, based on Cross Street in Oldham, near the lights there. Fantastic service for anything you need on your car and tyres. Yeah, great there to look after you, and lifelong Latics fans as well. Also to Rick at Eden Creative in Royton. A big thank you to Rick, who puts all the designs and everything together as well. And again, a lifelong Latics fan, responsible for the Angry Owl, but won't hold that against him. And also to NFL Weekends. Big news coming out of NFL Weekends this week in that they're looking to be able to announce their trips to the States over the course of, I think it's May, that the NFL release their fixtures for the season. So check out their socials to find out when you can look to book a trip to the States for a weekend of a sporting experience you'll never forget. There you go. That's the sponsors plugged, and a big thank you to all of them. We move on to today's guest. Today's guest never played for the club, but he has had 2 spells with us. First, say he never played for the club. He never played for the first team. He started in 2008, where he spent 2 years in the youth team, 2008 to 2010. He then went to America to do some coaching and to play football out in America. He came back in 2013 and rejoined the club in a goalkeeping coaching capacity, and was made first team goalkeeping coach under Lee Johnson. He spent a further 3 years with the club before moving on to AFC Bournemouth, and now works for the FA as part of the England national team goalkeeping setup. So it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Anthony White to the Chaddy Enders this week. So a warm welcome, Anthony. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us this week. First up, how are you getting on with all the lockdowns and everything like that? How are you?
Yeah, doing well, thank you, mate. I suppose we've not really had a proper lockdown, really, because our Premier League season with Bournemouth continued through. Then I left Bournemouth, what would it be, about 16 weeks ago now. I've been on about 6-7 camps so far, so essentially it hasn't really stopped, which is fantastic, I suppose, for me. I haven't experienced a lockdown that many people have, but for everybody else in the real world, I can see it's quite tough.
So for those that don't know, what is your current role? Because it's a very exciting role, if I'm being honest. Tell us what the current role is.
Yeah, so my current role is, I suppose the title is men's national goalkeeping coach. So that really means that we can work with a sort of a wide variety of age groups within the England pathway. Quite exciting, really, because one minute you could be working, at the higher end of the age groups, and another minute you could be looking at like the under 15s and how they're coming through. And I suppose you're working with like the top youngsters, or the unknown youngsters that are coming through, and it's really quite nice to see what the next pathway is, and where a 17-year-old that is now, he could be playing for the first team in 3 or 4 years' time, which is quite exciting, to be honest.
And one of the things that must mean is that you still get to go and watch matches.
Yeah, just saying before, so like really fortunate at the moment to be able to go and watch, whether it be like under 18 games all the way to like first team games. And yeah, it was quite surreal. I was at West Ham a couple of weeks ago, and there was like 4 of us just sat in this empty stadium. You're watching a Premier League game, and there's literally 4 people in a, tens of thousands of seater stadium. It's just surreal. It'll be one of those experiences that you look back on years to come and just go, wow, how did this even happen,
Yeah, quite. So let's take you back. 2008, you arrived at Oldham. Talk us through that. Talk us through how you arrived at the club.
Yeah, so arrived in 2008. Was released from Stoke Academy at the age of 16. So I've been there for 6 years as a youngster. Went on a load of trials. So my dad, bless him, was taking me up and down the country on loads of trials. And it was actually between Rochdale, Oldham and Wigan at the time. I came to Oldham, which was great because my granddad was from Oldham, and my grandma, they were brought up on Chapel Road. So exactly where the training ground was. To be honest, as like a naive 16-year-old, I didn't know too much about Oldham Athletic. I initially thought they played in yellow, so how mistaken I was. But you know what a normal 16-year-old's like. They just, they just follow Premier League teams or Championship teams. So I had no idea. Tony Philliskirk invited me in. I got thrown into a house for a week, and I suppose like the rest is history. I was there for best part of 2 years and a bit, I suppose, training with I was part of the youth team there. You got to go up with the first team a little bit, and John Sheridan was the manager, then Dave Penny at the time. So yeah, really, really good experience.
So who were the sort of senior goalkeepers at the time at the club? Who were you sort of looking up to, if you like, there?
Yeah, so we had Greg Fleming, who was there. Mark Crossy was obviously there for a period of time. And Dean Brill, who we speak, me and Dean now probably every week, every 10 days. It's like become like really good relationship that we just text or give each other a phone call because he's now at Leyton Orient as first team goalkeeping coach there. So yeah, they were sort of your idols that you looked up to. There was also Darryl Flahaven. He came on loan at the time that Andy Collett was the goalkeeping coach. And again, even now with Flavs most recently was at Sheffield Wednesday as goalkeeping coach, but he's resided down here in Bournemouth, so quite easy to connect with him and have a chat as and when we can. So yeah, it's amazing that like your journey of 2008, that'd be like nearly 13 years ago, how you're now connecting back with those pros that you were looking up to in and around training. It was fantastic.
So who were your teammates in the youth team? What can you remember from your time playing in the youth team?
Yeah, I was fortunate to be in a cracking youth team, I suppose. I had the likes of Aaron Chalmers, who I think he's playing non-league football at the moment, but at the time he was tipped to be top draw. I had Philly McGrath, who's obviously a Northern Ireland international, Kirk Miller, James Stokowski. Who else was in my... Josh Olorenshaw, who's now in the army. He was the other goalkeeper that was alongside me. We had Tom Eves playing for Hull at the moment. We had some really good players in our youth team, and it'll always go back to me with like Tarky. We played in the FA Youth Cup against Rochdale. I think he gave away a penalty and scored an own goal, and we went out 4-1. I'll be honest, I think 4 of the goals were my fault. Never mind his own goals or anything else like that. But I don't think at the time, like, you could be honest, and I don't think at the time you'd have gone, Tarky's going to play in the Premier League. You always knew he had ability, so I don't think anybody would ever turn around and go, I thought. But to see him now, like, obviously I was back at Bournemouth a few months ago, and to see and play against him, it was just incredible to see like the journey of that 17, 16-year-old lad in the changing room to now being a stellar player in the Premier League. It's class, absolutely class.
And so you play your 2 years in the youth team. Did you get close to a pro offer? How did that? Because ultimately you left after a couple of years. What happened there? Was it on the table? Was it not?
No, so I never got offered a contract there. Tony Philliskirk told me at the time, we didn't have a goalkeeping coach actually at the time. I think the club were going through the time with that on the final day, and he just said, I think you might as well go and see your options in America and maybe get a degree and play at the same time. He says, because I probably see you in that bracket of maybe never playing for your country, but I certainly think that like the coaching would be an option. So go and coach for your country. So fast forward like 13 or 10 years later, it's happening. It's just a weird thing. But I remember those words to this day, Tony walking me out of the door. And yeah, I went over to America for 4 years, and it was a fantastic experience, especially for me, because I hardly played any games for injuries out there, but I got my teeth stuck into a club out there for 3 and a bit years, being one of the goalkeeping coaches. So it was class, really.
So after your spell in America, how on earth did you end up pitching back up at Oldham?
Yeah, so my missus is half Italian and half Oldhamer. So she lives in or lived in Royton. So obviously our ties were back in Oldham, should we say. And I was training at Crewe and training at Oldham, taking the youth team at Oldham at the same time. So back and forward. I'd been back in the country, I think probably about 4 weeks. And then Lee Johnson pulled me into a training session, said, "We join in for the day?" So I said, "Yeah, I'll join in, no problem." So I joined in the first team training session as a keeper. Thought, oh, maybe I've still got a chance here. Then I know that Bobby Mims was leaving to go to coaching a youth team. Like what an unbelievable opportunity. I said, 100%, please just yeah, like anything you need. So I think from like the end of January time, I ended up taking the first team to the end of the season. Paul Rachubka and Mark Oxley were the goalkeepers at the time. And then, yeah, like I had another 2 and a bit years at the club. So altogether, probably like 5 years at the club. It was unbelievable.
So I guess there you're in your early 20s and you've got 2 goalkeepers that are older and had played quite a lot of league football, certainly in Paul Hub's case by that point. How was that? Was that difficult? How did you sort of get your ideas across to them?
Yeah, really difficult. I was 21 at the time, I think I was, and Paul, I think he was definitely in his 30s. Paul was fantastic. Chubbs was brilliant. He just the first week he let me just roll with what I thought as a naive sort of youngster was sort of good at, all the bells and whistles. And then he pulled me to one side. We sat down and had a coffee, and he said, "Look, I've seen a lot in football." And I suppose it was like a really honest chat. It was a really good chat, and we started to, I suppose, like have an understanding together. I couldn't really give him anything in terms of like experience, but I could create a good environment for him to hopefully go and perform each week. So it was just me understanding him. We're from a similar area, so yeah, he was fantastic for me at that age, like unbelievable. Something that probably the fans wouldn't see, but yeah, he was fantastic.
One of the things you mentioned there is creating an environment. And one of the things from when I was at the club that I distinctly remember is you making an office out of a toilet.
Yeah, yeah. So as a youth team player, I can only go back. We used to get changed in the changing rooms, and then the kit man or the kit ladies used room to the right hand side by the toilets. I suppose I had bins. It was an old toilet, and as everybody used to walk past, the drinks we used to just throw over the top of the door, and it used to just land in the bins. So when I got in there, I was like, I need a place to stay because the manager's office isn't big enough, so I can be up there for a period of time, but I want my little room. So I got my hammer and everything out, chiseled out the toilet, chiseled out the sink and everything else like that. And yeah, it wasn't glorious or anything like that. I had my own little laminated door sign on saying goalkeeping department, but it was my space, if you know what I mean. And for me, like that club meant so much. So my own little space in a club that meant so much was like, I took it with pride. I'd have my little shelves up there and my little photos and everything else, and it was just a place that was yours, I suppose. So yeah, it was pretty cool. The lads didn't forget though, by the way, to keep throwing the bottles over the top all the years that I was there.
So how was it then on like starting the away trips and all that with the first team? Did you have to do initiations? You hear about the players having to get up and sing songs and all that. As a young coach going away with the first team, did you have to do anything like that?
And I've never done one with Oldham. The only initiation I've ever done was with Bournemouth, and my daughter had just been born, so I decided to sing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star." That's the only initiation I've ever done. I definitely got booed off stage, put it that way. But I've certainly seen some initiations. There's been some crackers that have definitely got the lads involved, I suppose.
So how were those sort of your first taste of senior football and the away trips? You mentioned that Lee Johnson was manager at the time. How was that? Was that something your first sort of senior manager you've worked with? How was the relationship there?
Yeah, so massive learning curve for me. I just been a player in that environment, going into like a senior management role, I suppose. And Lee Johnson was unbelievable. Like I'm sure you could see from the results that we had at that time that he was there. But as a man, he was fantastic. He was true to his word with whatever he said to you. He was firm but fair, like really firm but fair. and then he expected quite a high lot off you. So we didn't have a massive budget, as an example. We had to scrap and scrape for everything that we could, but he still wanted more off you, no matter what that was. So I remember at the time, Lee wanted to do some work with like a wall for the goalkeepers. So we were working together, manager and coach. And so I went over to B&Q and got the plastic off a shed roof, and the groundsman at the time, this guy Frank, put some like a fiver, but the mannequins would have cost us nearly 150 quid just to get. So for a £5, Frank's managed to nail these things to the back, and we've all of a sudden got ourselves a plastic wall. So it's just brilliant, little things like that you really made you go after, or even like reutilize around the stadium and stuff like that to get the best out of what we could.
After a bit of time, Lee Johnson moved on. And next in is Dean Holden. Obviously, Dean was with Lee. How was your relationship with Dean? Did things change after Lee left?
Yeah, so Dean is slightly different manager. He was, I suppose, through the experiences that he's had in life, and it's not for me to say, but he's quite a deep thinker, really humble man, wants everybody to play a part in what you're trying to develop. So I wouldn't say Dean was different to Lee. He was probably more of a friend. That's the relationship that you had as a friend, and somebody that's obviously gone on to succeed a lot with Bristol City and obviously the other clubs that he's been at. But I can't speak highly enough of Dean. Just the way that he sort of presented himself to the players wanted to play for him, just because of the persona that he had around the place. He was a family man, but he was also a club man. He was top draw. Top draw.
And then Dean took that job to the end of the season, and then another new manager comes in, Darren Kelly. As a goalkeeping coach that's kind of already at the club, when new managers come in, are you sort of thinking, it's part of you thinking he might bring his own men in here?
Yeah, so that was quite a tough time for me. Me and Darren are good friends now, and we were during that spell as well. It was a tough time for me because I think I was as my third manager, I was only 23 at the time, and there'd been a lot of reports in the press, and it was hammered down that they were going to bring in new goalkeeping coaches or a senior goalkeeper that was going to take that role. So suppose at 23, you're quite nervous. I had a house at the time, a mortgage to pay and everything else. You're quite nervous that your job's going to go and what do I do? And especially probably hearing those things and then having to deal with a manager in that sense was probably quite tough. But I have to say Darren was very good at the time that he was there. He certainly tried to develop things and build things for the better of the club. I think it was just a really tough time for him to come in, I suppose, with his first senior job. But he's definitely going on and doing great things at the moment, and we keep in touch, via text or messenger or whatever it might be. So yeah, a different manager, didn't get the same amount of time as others had, but good to learn off in just a different experience, I suppose, with his life that he'd led.
And in your role, do you have a sort of say or an input in goalkeepers that the club are looking to sign at any point?
Yeah. Did I get to have a say, you say, mate?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, they'd always ask. So one of the things that I suppose stepping from a player into a coach, the guy, I remember him pulling me to the side on the first week and him just saying to me, make sure you know every goalkeeper in this country that we could get a hold of. So probably for the first 12 months, I didn't really have a great say in who was brought in and what was said because I was so young and so new to it. That people probably had the agent contacts and that list sort of built up already. I didn't have that when I first came in. I was simply coaching and trying to almost develop myself in the department. And then I suppose when Joel started to come onto the scene, so brought Joel straight out the youth team and Joel came into the first team. That was when we started to really have a say in what we were trying to build. I'd sat down with the chairman and it was a case of him wanting to bring young goalkeepers through. Hence why we brought David Cornell in. Neil Etheridge came in for a period of time as well. But it was a case of like, can we get Joel in the building? Can we make him potentially sellable as an asset, which we did. He went to Huddersfield, and the same with Chris Renshaw. He moved on to Everton. So, I think that was probably a great time. Me and him, me and Joel, me and Dave, me and Chris keep in touch regularly. Like, they came to my wedding and stuff. So far more than just like a relationship on the field. Like, we're very, very close off the pitch. But it was definitely a good time to bring players through and ultimately sell them. It might have kept the club afloat at a period of time, if you know what I mean. So it was great to play a part in that, if I'm honest.
From sort of when I was at the club, I always remember that you and the chairman, you and Simon, always had a pretty decent relationship as well, didn't you?
Yeah, like Simon was, I think because I was so young, I think just because like I really wanted to work up in the sense that like, nowhere else in the world would you get this unbelievable opportunity to set up a goalkeeping department and to almost like try and improve everything that you could on limited budget. So I think the chairman just appreciated the fact that we didn't have a lot of money, but like, let's make the most of it, because it was the start of my career. So it ultimately, selfishly, it was going to help me. But on the other end, it's going to help the players, hopefully, and it's also going to help the club. So there was like a threefold to it. But one story that I can always remember, we went to Stirling Uni for a pre-season, and we had to stay in these apartments, which was fine, but we had no money for breakfast really. So we had to put up breakfast boxes. So we had to go and fill these boxes. We had £25 a box to put eggs, bread, all that kind of stuff. And you can imagine, the pre-season trips that we went on at Bournemouth were just lavish and crazy. But it was unbelievable to have to work out as a youngster, like, I'm going to have to go to Tesco here. I'm going to have to find probably the manager of Tesco. I'm going to have to work out here how I can get a little bit of food that's maybe a little bit cheaper so that we've got 150 quid here to last a week's worth of breakfast on a pre-season tour. Like, we've got to sort this out for 30 players. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, unbelievable experiences that you cannot write. I have to say, it's probably one of the most enjoyable times in football working for that club, just because, yeah, the experiences are just class. So.
And I guess that probably, now you've sort of gone on, you've progressed, you've had time in the Premier League at Bournemouth, and now you're working for England on the international stage. I guess that coming from that background and having the grounding at Oldham sort of helps, if you like, as to where you are now.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think, especially on the money sense, like the first few weeks at Bournemouth, I was going around different rooms, and anything that was like surplus to requirements was like, maybe I can use that for something, like, even if it's just in my office, maybe I can reuse that, upcycle it, sort of thing. Maybe if I just give it a bit of a paint and a new wheel, it'll be happy. So I think you appreciate money, and you definitely appreciate like the hard work in football, that it's not just a case of turn up, get paid, and off you go home. It's like I keep reiterating, it's probably one of my most enjoyable times in football. Simon towards the end would give me the key to the stadium, which was brilliant. So he'd let me go in, open up, turn the alarms off, and close up when we went home. And if it was turn the alarms off, great. And I suppose you feel part of something. You felt like you were making a difference in a sense. So I can't speak highly enough of A, the club, but B, Simon. Simon, was class for me, if in every sense.
So during your time at the club, who were the sort of biggest characters in the dressing room?
Crofty definitely has to be one of the biggest characters. So even though you were probably like one of the senior management as a goalkeeping coach, there was 2 or 3 times where him and Lockie would definitely lock me in my own office. And he never had a key, so he couldn't necessarily lock me in permanently, but the kit man was on it. So whenever the kit man's trolleys got full, Yeah, so they were some great times from that sense. Like Lockie and Crofty were hilarious. Then we have Brownie, Connor Brown, who, if anybody knows Connor Brown, he's fantastic on the pitch, but he's even better off it. He just he brought smiles to a dressing room on a really dull day. So when we used to go through some testing times, yeah, Connor was top drawer. But then you had like top pros around it as well, like Liam Kelly as an example, Danny Philliskirk, Mike Jones, people like that. You just had some Jonathan Forte. Like, you think of that dressing room, that was unbelievable. You remember us in the playoffs? I think it was in 2013-14. We were right up there, weren't we? 2013 or 14-15, we were right up there for a period of time. And you look back to that dressing room, Gary Harkin as an example. You had some great players, but the dressing room was top draw.
Yeah, Gary Harkins. I remember him sort of coming down from Scotland and sort of coming on at Liverpool in the FA Cup game we had there, and everyone looking around going, "Who's this lad?" And then he's bringing the ball down out of the air and he's twisting and turning. And you think he doesn't play anything like he looks.
No. James Dayton was another one. Do you remember Dates?
Yeah,
I'm sure you remember Dates. Like, what a character he was. Like, another person that, like, off the pitch you wouldn't think is just this unbelievably fantastically gifted footballer until he steps on, because he was just this character off the field that wanted to constantly goad you, take your keys from your car, hide your car, change your, put deep heat in your boxes or something like that. He was definitely one that wanted to wind you up and do anything he could to brighten your day. No, he was brilliant. Dates.
So then John Sheridan came in. So you talk about earlier about things sort of going full circle. And Shez came back in, and he was the first team manager when you were a youth team player. So how was that? I mean, Shez has sort of come in and done a couple of rescue acts over the years. How was Shez for you?
It was really interesting again to see like a different manager. So completely different to the previous ones in the sense that he galvanised the changing room in terms of, this is what we're doing today. So I think we had 10 games to not get relegated essentially. And it was like, look lads, and it is survival. So we're going to go out there. It's 11 players versus 11 players. We'll train as in 11v11 and off we go. I suppose there was no, it wasn't as regimented as previous, if you know what I mean. There was no exact structure. There was probably just a plan of action of like, we need to do this. We can't get relegated. It's never happened in the club's history in terms of for the last 27 years. So we're not doing it now. So he certainly galvanised that dressing room to do it. And I think before that happened, Matt, one of the most amazing or surreal experiences was going away to Bradford City. So just before Shez came in, me and Tony Philliskirk was my manager as a kid, and now I'm his assistant at Bradford City away in front of thousands of people. It was just that. I remember standing next to Tony Philliskirk, just this most surreal moment going, how have I ended up here? I'm 22 years old. He was my manager like 4 years ago, and now I'm stood next to you against Bradford City. Like, what is going on? This is unbelievable. This is amazing.
Because I think I remember right. Were you you were pretty much the youngest senior, not just goalkeeping coach, but you were one of the youngest senior coaches in the country, weren't you, at the time?
Yeah, I suppose so. It's like that stat. So every newspaper report that you see, or every time, and coaches do it no matter what you say. Every time you go onto the Boundary Park forum and you read that, and the goalkeeper's had a bad game and it's my fault, you sort of want to hang on to identity, don't you? And I suppose the identity that I had at that time at 21 was either being the youngest coach or take it away from me, if you want to call it that. And that's probably the fear that I say I enjoyed it, but for the best part of 3 years, you probably lived in a bit of fear of, I don't want that to go away. So, yeah, it's an interesting one.
So in the dressing room after a game, if the goalkeeper's made a horrendous mistake and it's cost either a win or a draw, are you sort of walking back into the dressing room thinking, "Oh God, I'm going to get this now"?
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, because my office was probably a good 100 meters away from the team manager's office, I learned to put my office as far away as possible in a different room, in a different part of the stadium. So I'd say for the first 6 months of my career, I'd definitely hide in there. And then as I got a bit older, I got a bit more respect to be able to walk in there and deal with the situation. Fortunately, the managers that I worked for were really good at handling that scenario. Respectful of my sort of understanding at that time, but be respectful of, like, you go into a change room and you hammer a goalkeeper, you're either going to get two responses, like a backlash from the goalkeeper or almost like a sense of like, why did I need to do that on reflection? So it was definitely handled really well. Probably the only, well, to be honest, I didn't, looking at it, we've had some poor results on the road, like an 8-1 loss at MK Dons, which you would normally attribute to a goalkeeper. But I think if you can remember on that day, Paddy Kenny was exceptional. I think without him, it probably could have been into double figures. So, yeah, I can't actually remember a time where the manager or assistant has gone in and hammered a goalkeeper in front of people. It was normally me away from everywhere. So, but no, good learning times. I'm glad that people did. It was good. It shows that you're human, so it was good. Yeah.
So at that point, after working under Shez, you go to Bournemouth. How did that come about? How did that job? Because like it's not a little move. You're not moving half an hour away. You go into the South Coast. You are literally the other end of the country.
So all that happened was we both finished our A license. Sort of like we're going to not get a contract, if I'm honest. He's probably going to bring in his own goalkeeping coach. So Shez had given us the Monday off. I turned off my phone. I just left it in the drawer. Just said, just clear my head. Everything else, just put it in the drawer. When I turned my phone back on that evening, I got a missed call from Mossy down at Bournemouth. And all he said was like, do you want to come and be my assistant? So Mrs. had come back from work and she was working at Kellogg's at the time as a marketer. I said, just so you know, like, I know we're getting married in 3 or 4 weeks. I said, but as soon as we come back from the honeymoon, I've just accepted a job from Bournemouth. He said, oh, my missus is like, all right, what's the terms? Like, what's your contract? I said, didn't ask. I just accepted. So I had no idea really what the terms of the contract were or anything like that. I just knew that what an unbelievable opportunity that was, to essentially go to everything that you'd worked for. And I suppose in the back of my head was like the uncertainty of what might happen in terms of my contract at Oldham at the time. That had to play. Yeah, geographically, it was about 5.5, 6 hours away. Sorry. So, it was certainly a big old journey.
And I guess walking, you sort of alluded to it before, but walking in on the first day at Bournemouth, it must have been a massive culture shock for you compared to what you've been used to. Yeah, so
people often say that, but like I see similarities in Bournemouth and Oldham. It's a small club in the sense of like 13,000 seater stadium. They had great facilities, but they weren't of the Chelseas and Tottenhams of the world. So what I really liked about being at Bournemouth was it was a humble club. So you had a manager that had been there for years, similar to my past at Oldham. You had staff there that had been there for a long time, staff that had come through and players from League One to the Premier League. And, the training ground was connected to the stadium, similar to Oldham. So there were so many similarities. It almost like you put Oldham down south. So I didn't feel like it was a daunting experience going in. It was almost like they'd had the luxury of going up to the Premier League and they'd just now been able to have different facilities, different pieces of equipment, but probably this same philosophy of like, if we can upskill or recycle or anything like that, let's do it. If there's a piece of equipment there that we can still use, why not? It's not just a case of we're in the Premier League and let's go and splash the cash. It really was a real similar feel of Oldham. They just happened to have a little bit more money and they were playing in the Premier League. So it was a nice environment for me to go in, I suppose.
And the weather's a lot nicer in Bournemouth as well, mate. So that's got to be a winner as well.
Yeah, it's sunshine today, so yeah, it's beautiful. I can't complain. There's not been many times where I've had to like put 3,000 coats on like I did at Chapel Road on many occasions.
So I've now got a few sort of quickfire questions for you about things and people at Oldham. So don't think too long about it. Just sort of fire out with the first or second names that come to mind. So during your time at Oldham, doesn't have to be a goalkeeper. In fact, probably easy for the answer if it's not a goalkeeper, because it might make it easier for you to answer. Best player you ever worked with at Oldham?
Carl Winchester.
Okay, and Carl's doing
because he was just so technically and tactically gifted. He was, that doesn't discount everybody else. I think I'm looking at it from a youngster coming through. He was phenomenal, and everything that he had to go through to get to where he did. Yeah, I'm going to go with Winnie Esther, as they call him.
Okay. Out of every player at Oldham through your time there, loosest cannon?
Crofty. has to be Crofty. Oh, the times with Crofty was just fantastic. I can't even describe the times with Crofty. Like, I know the fans will see him as just this picture, but to have him in the dressing room and some of the things that he would come out with and do, just a different level, but a professional at the same time.
Love that you've got that in there as well. Professional as well. Yeah, very professional as well.
Yeah.
Are there any best night out from your time at the club?
Best night outs. I think it would be towards the end of it'd be David Dunn's reign. So we went out in Manchester, and obviously Dunny being Dunny and knowing a lot of people, we had a really good night out there. I think Burnley were in the same building as us at the time, and I suppose like the connections, like even just there, like Tarky was then in the Burnley team only 2 years later. It's madness. Or 3 years later, we've gone on a night out as a team, as a group of staff, and then he's going to be with that team in 2 or 3 years' time. But no, great night out. That was under Dunny Drain. That would have been really good night out.
Okay. Your most enjoyable game, if you had to pick one game from your time at Oldham that you enjoyed the most, what would it be?
I'm going to say two games, actually. First game would be the debut game, which would be Gillingham at home. So we won 1-0, Mark Oxley played. So obviously getting a clean sheet, you're on a high. And I suppose when Joel made his debut, so Joel made his debut at Bristol City at home, coming on as a substitution for Jake Keane. I think we lost the game, if I remember rightly. We lost the game, but it was just the fact that you'd seen this kid go through transition, and his granddad was in the crowd and everything else. I think that for me was just like, forget the moments in the game. That was just like probably one of my most enjoyable, seeing a kid make a debut that had been through the club for so many years. So, yeah, really good times.
And on the flip side, the worst game you were ever involved in at Oldham?
Has to be MK Dons away, 8-1 loss. It has to be. The stadium, MK Dons Stadium, obviously it's a new one, is so big. So it definitely didn't get filled at all. You go into this club and the inside of MK Dons' stadium is unbelievable. It's fantastic. You've got like waterfalls and you've got these things that go down. So automatically they're on another level. And then I think it was 5-0 or something at half time. And I could just feel myself sinking further and further down into my seat, hoping that it was just going to swallow me up. It was an awful feeling. Then you have to get back on the bus for 4 hours to go home. It wasn't a nice day at all.
Yes, mate. I was sat behind the goal. I'm well aware. And I guess, but final question then from me would be, your best overall memory of your time at Oldham?
Really hard, and I'm not trying to skirt around the question. It's really hard to answer that. My memory of Oldham was the fact that somebody gave me an opportunity. The club had nothing, but yet every single day I was really excited to go into the club. So I wouldn't necessarily pinpoint one memory necessarily. I think the whole experience of those last 3 years as a coach there, I was itching to get in the door in the morning. I couldn't wait to get there. It was like a new challenging day. The club are giving you the keys. It was like, I can't wait to go and open up like my office in the morning. So I'd say the whole thing, like, yeah, I've got a lot of love for Oldham, even now, you know. Hopefully one day, be back there one day. You know, it's a great place. So.
Excellent. That seems like a great place to do it. Thank you very much for joining us, mate. That was fantastic. Thank you.
No, thank you, mate. Thank you.
A huge thank you to Anthony for taking the time to join us. Great to hear from him. Some interesting behind the scenes stuff there from Anthony. Yeah, thanks very much for tuning in. Again, thank you to our sponsors, to AC Tyres, to NFL Weekends, and to Eden Creative. A big thank you to Technical Luke, who puts all this together. And I know there was a couple of sound issues at some point during the interview there. So thank you to Luke for sorting those out. In the next few weeks, we've got Ian Marshall joining us, legend. Great to have Ian Marshall joining us. We have also got Robbie Simpson coming up. We have got Wayne Hurst, Chaddy the Owl coming up. And we've got a few more to come out as well. So yeah, thank you very much for tuning in as always. And we'll be back next week with episode 10, which will be Ian Marshall. Have a great week. And yeah, thank you for tuning in.